Welcome to the Depth Dive. Today we're diving right into Gabrielle Zevin's novel, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. It's gotten a ton of buzz.
It really has. And we're not just doing a quick review here. This is more of an exploration looking at the themes, the characters, how it's put together. We've pulled in thoughts from quite a few reviewers, too.
Exactly. Our goal really is to figure out why this book hit such a chord with so many people.
Yeah, and how Zevin uses, the world of video games, which might sound niche, but she uses it as this lens to look at relationships, creativity, life itself, basically. We want to pull out the really key stuff.
Okay, so let's start at the core. The premise really revolves around two people, Sam Massour, who later goes by Mazer, and Sadie Green.
Right. Their lives get tangled up over, decades. And it starts way back, pretty unusually when they're kids.
Tell us about that first meeting. It's quite memorable.
It really is. So Sadie's about 11. Her sister's sick in the hospital with cancer. And Sadie's sort of encouraged to go play Nintendo, kill some time. And that's where she finds Sam. He's got his foot in a cast, and apparently he hadn't spoken. Hadn't said a word in months because of some trauma.
Wow.
Yeah. So Sadie watches him play, then takes a turn, and he just says to her, "You're pretty good." And that's it. That's the first thing he said.
Just like that.
Just like that. It was such a big deal, apparently, that a nurse actually asked Sadie to come back, keep playing with him. It's this really quiet, powerful start to everything.
But like a lot of childhood friendships, things didn't stay smooth. They had a falling out.
They did. And then years pass. Flash forward to the 90s. They're both in college. Sam's at Harvard. Sadie's at MIT.
Which was pretty significant for a woman at MIT back then, especially in programming.
Absolutely. A real trailblazer. So Sam sees her across a public square, like a train station platform or something. He calls her name.
And she ignores him?
Initially, yeah. So what does he do? He yells out their old inside joke from playing Oregon Trail.
Oh, no. Don't tell me.
Yep. Sadie Green, you have died of dysentery diarrhea.
He actually yelled that.
Loudly. Apparently. And it worked. It totally broke the ice after all that time. It's funny how those shared things, those little jokes, can just cut through everything.
It really is like a password back into the friendship.
Exactly. And that reunion, that's what kicks off their actual collaboration.
Yeah.
Sadie shows Sam this game she made for a class. It was called Solution.
Okay.
And Sam, along with his roommate Marks, who's super important, he becomes like the third leg of their stool.
Right. The producer, the stabilizer.
Totally. They both play it and are just blown away. And that's when Sam goes to Sadie and says, basically, let's make a game together. That's the spark.
And that spark leads them into the whole gaming industry. They start their own company, Unfair Games.
And they have this massive breakout hit, Ichigo.
Tell us about Ichigo. It sounds fascinating, even if you're not a gamer. How does Zevin make that world feel real?
Well, Ichigo sells millions. The premise is there's this child who's lost at sea after a tsunami, and they have to find their way home with just like a bucket and a shovel.
Simple, but evocative.
Totally. And reviewers pointed this out. The game itself touches on these really universal ideas, loss, finding your way back, resilience. So even if you don't know anything about game development, you get the feeling. The book pulls you into their world, the coding sessions, the deadlines.
But it's the human story underneath that really connects.
Exactly. And the gaming stuff is the backdrop, but it's really about them.
And their collaboration. It's not exactly smooth sailing, is it? Zevin seems to really dig into the messy reality of creating something together.
Oh, definitely not smooth. She completely dismantles that whole lone genius myth. Sam and Sadie's partnership is full of, ego clashes, jealousy over who gets credit, arguments about creative direction.
Sounds realistic for any intense collaboration.
It is. One reviewer called it a brutal pas de deux of genius and bruised egos. It shows that real innovation often comes from that friction, from the push and pull, the trust, and, the fights.
And it feels like the games themselves become almost like extensions of their inner lives, like they pour their own issues into the code.
That's a great way to put it. Consciously or not, their games are just soaked in their own emotional baggage, their wounds, their hopes, their viewpoints. Ichigo, for instance, clearly echoes their own feelings of being lost or searching for something.
So the creation is a mirror.
Absolutely. A profound one.
Stepping back from the games for a second, the book is also just a deep, deep look at friendship itself. Not the easy, idealized version, but the real thing.
It really gets into the nitty-gritty. Sam and Sadie's bond is
Oh.
It's complicated, it's painful sometimes, but also incredibly powerful. It evolves over decades.
And it requires actual work, right? It's not just passive.
So much work, constant renegotiation, dealing with hurt feelings, needing vulnerability, needing forgiveness. It really makes the case that non-romantic love can be just as intense, just as life-shaping as any romance.
And it's not just Sam and Sadie, there's a whole cast.
Right. Zevin builds this whole world of characters who feel incredibly real. They're nuanced, they're gray, nobody's perfect. And Marx, like we mentioned, he's so crucial. He's the anchor, the emotional glue sometimes. The book takes you through the whole roller coaster: love, loss, success, failure, heartbreak, grief, all of it.
Speaking of grief, the characters face some really significant losses, both personally and professionally. How does the act of making games, function for them in the face of that? Is it just escape?
It's more than escape, I think. When they face these huge losses, making something new becomes this powerful way to process it, to heal maybe, or at least to cope.
Like building a memorial almost?
Yeah, kind of. Their projects become infused with that remembrance. It's a way to keep going, to find meaning again, to transform the pain into something else. Art is survival, you know. It's messy, but it feels vital for them.
And within that messy relationship, there's so much room for misunderstanding. How does Zevin show that?
She uses the shifting perspectives really effectively. One chapter, you're in Sam's head, seeing why he did something or what he assumed Sadie meant.
Okay.
Then the next, you're in Sadie's head, seeing her completely different interpretation of the exact same event. It brilliantly shows how easily we project our own stuff onto other people.
How we tell ourselves stories about what others are thinking.
Exactly. And how important it is to actually, talk and check those assumptions. It's a lesson that hits home, I think, for anyone who's ever been in any kind of close relationship, work, or personal.
And another layer to Sam's character is his disability, his chronic pain from the accident. How does the book handle that?
With a lot of subtlety and compassion, I'd say. It's clearly central to who he is. It shapes his relationships, how he sees himself. It leads to periods of isolation, affects how he communicates.
But it doesn't define him entirely.
No, exactly. It refuses to reduce him just to his condition, but it absolutely acknowledges the profound day-to-day impact it has on his life. It's handled really well, very humanely.
Beyond the characters and themes, the way the story is told is pretty unique too. The structure isn't straightforward.
Not at all. It's nonlinear, jumps around in time, flashes forward, rewinds. There's even, you get this, a chapter told from the point of view of an NPC, a non-player character, inside one of their games.
Whoa. Okay, that's different.
Isn't it? And the structure itself feels like a nod to video games. Concepts like respawning, getting a do-over, exploring different paths.
Like hitting restart after you fail a level?
Kind of. But crucially, like in life, when Sam and Sadie respawn after a failure like a game flopping or a personal crisis, they still carry the memory, the experience of that failure. They learn, or they're supposed to. It adds this whole other layer to the idea of second chances.
That's really clever. And Zevin also mixes like high art references with pop culture, right?
He does, seamlessly. The title Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, that's straight out of Shakespeare's Macbeth. Heavy stuff about life's futility. But then, mixed right in, you have references to Donkey Kong, Oregon Trail, complex Japanese RPGs. It's this brilliant blend.
What do you think that does, putting Shakespeare next to Nintendo?
Well, I think it does a couple of things. It really challenges that old-fashioned idea that some culture is high and some is low. It basically says, look, video games can be art. They can carry just as much emotional weight, tell stories just as profound as a Shakespeare play.
It validates the medium.
Totally. And it speaks to a generation that grew up with both. It makes the story feel incredibly relevant and modern. It's no wonder reviewers were calling it things like a magnum opus or a modern classic. Some said it just broke them in the best way.
Yeah, you can see why it really resonates.
Definitely. So if we boil it down, what are the big takeaways from this deep dive? I think one is definitely that friendships change, they evolve, and that's okay. And non-romantic love, it can be earth-shatteringly important.
Right. And collaboration is hard. It's messy, full of friction.
But that's often where the good stuff happens, right? Where the magic is. Also, the idea that you can work through grief or at least process it by creating something.
Making something new out of the pain. And that virtual worlds aren't just escape. They can reflect deep emotional truths.
Yeah. And finally, maybe that success isn't free. It costs something. And, you can always restart a game.
But you can't restart life.
Exactly. But maybe the lessons carry over. Maybe that's the point.
So perhaps the final thought to leave everyone with is this. This deep dive kind of shows us that life, a lot like those games Sam and Sadie poured themselves into, is really about trying again and again.
Not necessarily aiming to win in some grand sense.
Right, but finding the meaning in the trying, in understanding yourself and the people you care about, even as everyone keeps changing. Maybe think about how that applies to your own life, your own projects or relationships.